Welcome to the Dr. Sam Shay Show. Here we solve health mysteries like chronic pain, stubborn weight gain, gut issues and unexplained fatigue, and learn the latest on health, wellness, nutrition, functional medicine, and functional genetics for a healthier, longer life. Welcome, everyone. This is my flagship podcast / radio show. I was very thrilled to have Dr. Paul Beaver, who's the Chief Science Officer at Fitgenes, a functional genetics lab in Australia. It was a great first episode, and as expected, there are a few hiccups along the way with some sound issues, but they smooth out about a fourth of the way through it. Give me about 10 minutes to go over my initial nervousness of being on a live radio for the first time, interviewing someone and have it being recorded. So I appreciate your patience and good humor on that, but the first 10 minutes do have a lot of great information in it, despite my nervousness and tiny bit of sound issues. In the entire episode, we cover a lot of ground. For example, the difference between monogenic disease testing versus functional genetic profiling, why your genes are not your destiny, that your genes are like a dimmer switch. They can be dialed up and dialed down. Why identifying more gene variations in a genetic profile isn't necessarily better, but better organized data of key genes is better. Why it's important to find the upstream genes that control the downstream driving processes. The difference between a SNP, which is shorthand for single nucleotide polymorphism, versus a copy variant, or the number of duplicates of a gene, specifically discussing the copy variant number and significance of the AMY1 gene, which is the key gene that controls salivary amylase that digests carbohydrates. How this AMY1 copy number variation tracks the difference between paleo diets, which are low carb, versus high carb diets in the higher agricultural areas. We also covered the genetic mismatching of the AMY1 copy numbers with the current high carb environments, the link between low AMY1 copy numbers with increased risk of diabetes, what foods epigenetically suppress amylase production from the AMY1 gene, how to the reverse of that, how certain activities in foods temporarily boost amylase production, which is important if you're a low copy number of the AMY1 gene and you need to go to a high carb event like a birthday party or social function or business lunch. Why men will listen to the results of a genetic profile much more so than other functional tests. The mindset difference between getting a genetic profile versus a genetic test. Spoiler, it's test. You have the thought it's going to be a pass-fail. Why genetic profiles are the future of personalized, proactive, and preventive healthcare, and how knowing your genetic profile remove the dietary confusion, how to end yo-yo dieting, and the problematic and troubling trend in health hysteria over a singular focus on one particular variation as opposed to the entire context and groupings of other genes. The particular singular focus gene that people are going gaga and a bit hysterical over is the MTHFR gene, which we cover in a bit of detail. We cover the difference between health expectancy versus life expectancy, as well as the difference between energy-dense foods versus nutrient-dense foods. Why health expectancy is actually going backwards in today, and why genetic profiling is the bridge between Western medicine, science, and natural medicine lifestyle expertise. And we also cover the key distinctions between the Fitgenes profiling philosophy versus other genetic profiling companies, namely that Fitgenes focuses on genetic profiles that are based on patient health and empowerment versus disease models and fear. 2, the focus on finding key upstream genes instead of just as many downstream genes as possible. 3, lumping the genes together in key groups by key driving processes in the body, such as grouping specific gene clusters that control inflammation, free radical quenching, liver detox, methylation, cardiovascular health, and fat metabolism, versus lumping one gene to one single disease-based models. 4, every gene selected in the profile must have the ability to be changed beneficially through lifestyle. That's proven in the scientific literature. 5, that every recommendation has a scientific citation backed up for it, so it's science-based. 6, Fitgenes is not attached to any product or supplement company, meaning that the genetic profiling is not a front to send you tons and tons of supplements. And lastly, Fitgenes is focused on practitioner-only distribution and practitioner training and education to help practitioners properly guide their patients with their genetic profiles, which is a lot safer, particularly because if a lot of patients get just their genetic variations directly, they can get lost in the jungle and swamp of these single nucleotide polymorphism blogs and get led down the wrong track and worry themselves up into a fit. So I found that this interview was incredibly valuable and practical to better understand truly the future of all healthcare, that all of medicine is going in this direction, all of it. And everyone, I firmly believe, should get their genetic profile. Just skip your next vacation and get your genes profiled, as opposed to coming back from a vacation tired and tanned. You'll actually have something to help you for the rest of your life. So I hope you enjoy this interview. And Dr. Paul Beaver, he's got an amazing, interesting background, and we cover a lot. There's 2 main genetic profiles, one on the AMY1 Carbchoice, and the other one is on the larger 58 gene panel, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for listening. This podcast is brought to you by the Carbchoice Genetic Profile, where you can genetically determine your optimal diet through a simple cheek swab in the comfort of your own home. Are you confused about diet? Unsure of carbs versus fat? Gone gluten-free, yet don't feel much better? Well, you're not alone. I've taught diet and nutrition since the year 2000, and I thought I knew a lot about diet. Then I got my butt handed to me by Carbchoice, and I finally got the answers I wanted. You see, genetically, not everyone can tolerate carbs well, though some can. Think of it like this. A big pile of carbs, like rice, must be broken down by Pacman-like enzymes called amylase. A specific gene called AMY1 makes these carb-crunching Pacman-like enzymes, and each copy of this gene acts like a chute spitting out these Pacman to chomp down carbs. If you have 20 copies of this gene, you have a Carbchoice score of 20, meaning you have 20 chutes spitting out amylase Pacman, easily chewing through a big pile of carbs. If you only have 1 copy of the AMY1 gene, you have a Carbchoice score of 1, meaning you only have 1 chute spitting out amylase Pacman, which isn't enough to break down even a small pile of carbs. Even if the carbs are organic and gluten-free, the remaining undigested carbs become inflammatory, irritating, and imbalancing to the gut and gut bacteria, causing digestive problems with systemic consequences, which is exactly what happened to me. Turns out, I have a Carbchoice score of 2, meaning I only have 2 chutes making Pacman, which explained why even small amounts of carbs, even if they are organic and gluten-free, still caused me bad and embarrassing digestive problems. I used to think I was gluten intolerant, but in reality, I'm genetically carb intolerant. Fortunately, it only took a week of clearing up unnecessary carbs from my Carbchoice score of 2, and my digestive problems cleared up for the first time in 20 years. I strongly recommend you find out your Carbchoice score. If you have a particular diet you like, don't worry. You can adapt your existing diet to your Carbchoice score, and I can teach you how. Just go to www.drsamshay.com/Carbchoice, and I'll send you a free video about Carbchoice and how it compares to and integrates with 15 other diets, such as the paleo diet, ketogenic diet, slow carb, Mediterranean diet, blood type diet, the 5 types of vegetarianisms, metabolic typing, Weston A. Price, and others. Diet trends come and go, yet your genetics stay the same. Carbchoice is truly personalized nutrition through functional genetics. Also, when you opt in, you'll get a coupon code for 20% off your Carbchoice profile. Your Carbchoice profile comes with a 14-page report, includes food lists of what to eat and what to avoid, and includes how to temporarily boost your amylase Pacman production by up to 500% for those higher carb events like birthday parties, social events, or business lunches, even if you're a low Carbchoice score like me. A kit will be mailed to you anywhere in the world. You can do this simple cheek swab in the comfort of your own home, and I'll also email you video instructions on how to and not to do the cheek swab. And for a limited time, your Carbchoice score will include a 30-minute consult with me by phone or Skype to answer your questions about your Carbchoice profile and personalized nutrition. Just go to drsamshay.com/Carbchoice and get your free video training and 20% off coupon for your Carbchoice profile today. Welcome to the Dr. Sam Shay Show, and today I have the great honor and pleasure of interviewing Dr. Paul Beaver PhD. And Dr. Beaver spent his first 15 years of his working life involved in research and development, both internationally and in Australia, and has since worked in a variety of areas from compliance, risk management, occupational health and safety, personal professional development, to preventative health solutions. So for the past 20 years, Paul has been developing personalized health solutions for maximizing health potential based on the latest scientific and medical research, including the new disciplines of nutrigenetics and nutrigenomics, which is the study of the interaction between our genes, exercise, nutrition, lifestyle choices, and our health. During this time, Paul has worked with many medical practitioners and healthcare professionals in Australia and internationally, including New Zealand, towards improving the health and wellness outcomes of their patients. Paul is the co-founder and chief scientific officer at Fitgenes, Australia, an international provider of genome-based personalized healthcare and wellness services. His expertise and commitment to finding new and innovative solutions to the current global health crisis has contributed to the success, growth, and development of Fitgenes as an organization. As a result, Fitgenes has pioneered a personalized genome-based healthcare system, education program, and cloud-based IT platform to enable practitioners to harness the power of nutrigenomics for improving the health and well-being of their patients. In acknowledgement of Paul's commitment to helping people maximize their potential for healthy living and healthy aging using nutrigenetics and nutrigenomics, on the 1st of July 2016, he was appointed as an honorary senior research fellow in the School of Applied Health, Dietetics, and Nutrition at La Trobe University in Melbourne, Australia. Dr. Beaver, thank you so much for joining us. It's really wonderful to have a chat with you.
It's my pleasure, Sam. I just love getting the message out there that your genes are not your destiny, and there's things you can do about it by making the right nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle choices based on your unique genetic profile. And we don't have to always have this one-size-fits-all approach. So glad to be on the show with you, mate.
A couple of things I wanted to ask you. Now, I met you back in August, and that's where I actually went to your conference, and I learned how to do this functional genetic testing myself. And I was just really blown away by, just how in-depth and involved, genetics really can be. And I wanted to ask you, how did you actually get involved in functional genetics?
Well, I'm actually a doctor of engineering originally, and it's quite ironic now that I'm training cardiologists, gynecologists, breast cancer surgeons, nutritionists, and people such as yourself. It was in 1978, and I was doing my PhD in engineering, and we got one of those phone calls you don't want to get from your family doctor that my father, at 52, had cancer. Given 3 months to live.
It's amazing what will happen when our own family gets into a health crisis, and then it falls on us to try to figure out what can we do, to support them. I know that's happened somewhat in my life as well. But I'm just amazed by how frequently I hear that, where people get involved into health and wellness as a matter of necessity, whether it's for their own life or for the life of a member of their family, whether it's their child or their parents or someone else. And I commend you for really taking that kind of medical bull by the horn, so to speak. And I wanted to ask you, so what is the difference between, monogenic testing, paternity testing, genealogy testing, and what you do at Fitgenes?
Well, basically, I think that's the engineer in me that comes out, is the original testing when my father died and when my mother got sick. What I found was that the focus was all about looking at genes associated with diseases, such as hemochromatosis, haemophilia. And it was a very sort of negative, fatalistic sort of message. Now, there's 1 or 2% of genes which are monogenic. But what to me, we're only as good as the health of the basic building block of our body, which is our cells. And if we can get the cells functioning properly, keep them healthy, and if we can get our genes sending out the right signal, then healthy cell, healthy tissue, healthy organ, healthy body. So that's the approach that we took. So functional genetic, it's not testing, we actually call it genetic profiling, is that we look at the physiological things that underpin our health and well-being. And there are things such as inflammation, which is a protective mechanism when we say hurt an ankle, twist an ankle or do an injury. It's protective, but if it stays for too long, it is not protective. Things such as free radicals. For example, if you cut an apple in half and leave it, it goes brown. It's just the damage from free radical activity. So Fitgenes looks at what we call the physiological drivers that underpin our health and well-being. They have to be, number one, well-researched. They have to be more than 10% of any ethnic population. But more importantly, there have to be interventions in nutrition, exercise and lifestyle that the practitioners can help their patients make the best choices for them as an individual, not the one-size-fits-all. And our methodology works with athletes at the Olympic level, just people that want to have healthy living, healthy aging, people that may have high blood pressure, trouble losing weight. We have people that have mentally would like to be a bit more with it. We have had children with autism, but they're the same physiological drivers go across the whole thing. So that's the difference between the original monogenic disease-specific versus what we call functional genetic profiling versus paternity testing. We don't do paternity testing, or we don't do your family trees to find out you have six cousins twice removed in Iceland. So right. It's about...
You're officially the 332nd cousin of the Queen of England, and that's
like that.
The significance of that.
Yeah. What I wanted to do, I wanted to find out why my parents were susceptible to cancer. Now that I had my genetic profile done, I could look at the genetic vulnerability and the lifestyle choices they made that have an impact on their health. Now, I don't have to go down that road, so my genes are not my destiny, and it's very empowering to have that knowledge, as you would appreciate.
Yeah, it's the way that you've grouped the genes that you're testing is not by diseases, it's by drivers. It's like not like here's the one gene that causes this medical condition in the medical books. They're grouped by like-minded genes, and you can see what interventions will address the genetic expression of those groups of genes. Like you talked about, there's inflammation. You've got a big block of genes that are organized by do they increase inflammation, or are they anti-inflammatory? And inflammation is at the root of so many different processes, and if we know genetically if someone's at risk to overproduce inflammation or underclear it, and we can put the lifestyle changes in place now, then that will mitigate a huge number of problems down the line. And that's one thing I really love about what you've done is it's. I think I've mentioned this to some other colleagues of mine. It's not about more data isn't better, because there's just so many genes out there. It's not that more data is better; it's better organized data is better. That's usable and practical. And I wanted to, coming off of that, I wanted to ask you how is it that you actually chose the genes that you did? I mean, specifically, there's this really interesting one where you can genetically determine diet that you've talked about, and I've certainly run on many of my patients. I've run on myself, and it's called the AMY1 gene. Can you share with us your journey to finding this specific gene and what it's about, and how does it relate to people's diet?
Well, I think first of all, we had to design it because we were a startup company with no money, unlike some of the other companies that have got hundreds of millions of dollars behind them. And it was I think it's the systems and processes I learnt as an engineer. And that's the one comment that a lot of doctors have said, you were very systematic. So we looked at the physiological drivers, as we've just mentioned, and we tried to get what we call upstream as far as we could, because there's master regulators, master drivers in our genes. So you don't have to test 20, 30,000. You've got to find the key ones that affect things like the ability to burn fat, to make your arteries contract, to fight free radicals, to produce more antioxidants. And so it's about where they are in the biochemical processes. Now, the gene called AMY1 was a very interesting one. And I'll just step back and explain a difference that your DNA is within your cell, and it's like a twisted ladder for those that don't fully understand genetics. I'll just try and simplify it. One side of the ladder is you get from your mum, one side from your dad, and at each step, you get like these steps. You get half a step from mum, half a step from dad, and there's 3 possible combinations at any step. Now, that's like the instruction book of life that tells your body how to function, whether to expand the arteries, contract, detox, caffeine. And so that's what's called a SNP, a single nucleotide polymorphism. It's just one part of the gene. But there's other parts in our genetic makeup which they actually duplicate the whole gene. And the AMY1 is the gene that controls the amount of amylase that is produced within your mouth to break down starch. Now, we don't chew for very long, 20 seconds, so there's never been a lot of attention paid to this salivary amylase. They were looking more at pancreatic and in the gut. But what they found with this AMY1 gene is when we were hunter-gatherers, we had 1 to 4 what we call copy numbers, because we just didn't eat a lot of starch. When we did eat starch, it was the amylose, which is the resistant starches, not the so-called crappy starches, the amylopectins. And then when we started to migrate over thousands of years...
Paul, let me just back up a little bit and just kind of give a bit of a clarity, say in a different way, if some people aren't following the various physiology Scrabble words that we're saying here. So basically, you've got genes that can have variations, and then you've got genes that have extra copies of them. And the way that I've explained this to patients is that I've got, if it's a copy, like the none of copies of the gene I have that makes amylase, which is the enzyme that breaks down starches or carbs in our mouth. It's like if I've got 2 copies of this gene, I've got 2 chutes that are pumping out little Pac-Man called amylase that break down carbs. But some people can have up to like 20 or so. And people who've got huge numbers of these copies of these genes, they can spit out, multiples more Pac-Man to break down starch. So they have a much easier time breaking down starches, where someone like me, where I'm a 2, I only got 2 copies of this, it's very difficult. And if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that back as a hunter-gatherer times, we didn't really have access to a lot of really refined starches or kind of concentrated carbs like you see in processed grains or sugars or candy bars or candies or lollies or anything else. We had more. You mentioned the term amylopectin, which is it's basically a way that the vegetable world has bundled together a whole bunch of fuel resources for itself. It's the equivalent for the medical geeks out there is glycogen in our liver and in our muscles. But basically, we didn't come across these super refined carbs in the wild. We came across these bundled complex bits that we found in like tubers such as kumara or pumpkin, occasionally we came across fruits whenever they were in season for however many times of the year for a couple of days or a couple of weeks out of the year. Am I encapsulating that correctly?
That's correct, yes. And it's very interesting as you follow, as people migrated and started growing crops, the genetic adaptation where we got more copy numbers to cope, which meant we produced more of this amylase, and so we had a better ability to break down starches. And that's the people that have the high copy numbers of 9 and above. They're more the agricultural type. The problem we have is when you take someone that still has a low copy number of that, like a hunter-gatherer, or what I call traditional people. It doesn't, whether it be the Aborigines in Australia, the Maoris, the Pacific people, or the Navajo Indians. It's when you've taken them out of their natural environment and what they would eat and put them into our high-tech, fast-paced, microwave sort of lifestyle. That's the problem, where if you take someone that has a low copy number and put them into a high-starch, high-carbohydrate diet, genetically they can't cope. And then you have trouble with obesity, type 2 diabetes, weight, mood dysregulation, and so many other problems.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is it's a genetic mismatch. We've got,
absolutely, with our environment.
Yeah, genetic mismatch between what we developed, our genes developed in, the environment we developed in, and now the environment that we are in. And that some people, because I know this has been a constant, refrain from a lot of my patients. It's like, why is it that I'm sick, eating, and have all these issues, living this way, but my partner lives the same way that I do, and they're, in air quotes, fine? And to me, your work at Fitgenes doing these genetic profiles answers that question, that they are genetically, it's like they've got a different genetic filter through which all their environmental and lifestyle inputs are put through, that then creates different responses. So if I'm a which I am, I'm a 2 on this, on the bottom 10% of this amylase producing gene scale. If I eat a high carb, food pyramid diet, I do terribly, which I did for basically all the way up through my teenage years, because I'm genetically mismatched with what I was being fed. And since I've followed what I've seen on this test, I've gone basically back to paleo. Not basically, I think I am paleo at this point, because it matches my genetic copy number. And what I find so fascinating is that the average number of copy numbers, according to the reports I've been reading that you've generated, is that the average is actually 6 amongst it was a European population and Chinese Singapore. Is that correct?
That's correct. 6 to 8. That's the average. One of the interesting things we're talking about here is not about a small effect, a huge effect. And 2 years ago at the Imperial College in London, they looked at it and said, we wonder whether the obesity and type 2 diabetes epidemic has something to do with this AMY1 copy number. So they took people in Europe, Asia, and they put them on what the governments are recommending, 45% carbohydrate. And what they found is, as you count from a copy number of 9 down to 2, if you actually eat the food pyramid, what is recommended, your risk of obesity and type 2 diabetes increases 100%. Each copy number you have less. So someone that has a copy number of 2, if they eat 45% starch, they have an 800% increased risk of obesity, weight management problems, and diabetes. So it's a huge effect. And as you have seen, and our other practitioners globally, once they start reducing the amount of starch in the diet, they're seeing amazing results. And you mentioned the paleo diet. There's a book, an ebook called Death by Food Pyramid, where they talk a lot about AMY1. And the one thing that the paleo diet, the Mediterranean diet, and the whole food diet have in common is it's all about the amount of starch in the diet. That is the one common denominator to all of those.
Now, can you say more about the Mediterranean diet? Because I know there's some people out there who are thinking, oh, Mediterranean diet, that means lots of olive oil, pasta, and wine. Can you clarify that?
Well, first of all, when I talk about a Mediterranean diet, I'd rather talk about the components of a Mediterranean diet, because there's probably about 30 different quote Mediterranean diets. The one that I would talk about would be the Cretan Mediterranean diet back to post-World War II. But you've got to look at the ingredients. For example, with the AMY1 gene, having the pasta and rice is not a good thing. What we've found we've just done a research study at the Auckland University and with some doctor up in Auckland, and what we found was that the diabetics was more than 10%, most of them. And by getting the rice, the flour out of the diet and reducing the amount of starch had a huge impact on weight, and the parameters for type 2 diabetes. So what you want to do if you have a low copy number is you have to avoid the things that suppress the production of this amylase in the mouth. And one of the things is pasta and red wine. So when I'm saying about having the Mediterranean diet, you then modify and use the ingredients that are relevant to you as an individual, not everyone. So, and the thing is, if someone wants to have a glass of red wine and pasta with their meal and they are genetically susceptible to not being able to break down starch, what you would do is you would do simple things like have some lemon juice before the meal, because that significantly increases the amount of salivary amylase. I mean, you know when you suck on a lemon, what it does to your mouth. So it would be having a little bit of lemon juice and then having your protein and non-starchy vegetables maybe first, then having your glass of red wine and with pasta, but try and get some of the better types of pasta, the more lower GI ones. So it gives you a roadmap on what you need to do as an individual, not this one-size-fits-all.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like that's one thing I really liked. That's one thing I really, really liked about what you've put together is that it gives people they're not locked into this. So it's like even though I'm a 2, there are strategies that are given in the report on how to bump up your amylase temporarily if I find myself like at a birthday party or traveling or I'm at someone's house eating dinner and I don't want to be rude or whatever, and I can do things like you mentioned, the lemon juice or lime juice, and apple cider vinegar, exercise, a couple other things, and even certain foods that increase amylase, like like lettuce and artichoke and some other things, that I can temporarily boost my ability to break down these starches so that I can still function quite comfortably in a high carb world. But it's certainly not. But that's just something that I want to keep as more the exception than the rule, because I do want to have more as the rule. What is my diet and lifestyle according to my genes, not constantly trying to push my lifestyle in the way to cope with a genetic mismatch lifestyle. If that makes makes sense.
I think my wife has got a brilliant example of that. Genes are genetic profile, and again, I just want to emphasize, we look at the genes that control how your body functions. Once we've all got a playing field in life, like a rugby field, and the boundaries of the field are determined by your genetic profile. Now, from my point of view, my playing field might be smaller than yours with regard to cancer, but by knowing my genetic profile, I know I can stay in the playing field of life for healthy living, healthy aging. My genes are not my destiny. And so having for example, the AMY1 report and knowing your copy number, the report shows you what vegetables you should eat, what ones you should avoid. Same with fruit, vegetables. It also shows you the best time to exercise, and all these other lifestyle interventions. And the feedback we get are that they're not hard, but no one ever gave the patients a roadmap on what to choose. And it's not about this diet versus that diet. It's what are the ingredients of maybe the paleo diet, the Mediterranean diet, the whole food diet that is right for you compared to somebody else. And I think that's the important thing. And we've seen clinically amazing results, as you know, with this study into AMY1 and type 2 diabetes. So we have the clinical data to validate what we're doing. And the feedback is it's not hard. It's a roadmap. It gives you the playing field in life for healthy living, healthy aging.
No, 2 things on that. One is that I've noticed it's in terms of doing a genetic test, it's one of the few tests that I've done, particularly with my male patient. And we've got this term in this part of the world called bloke, and sometimes there's what's the phrase WSM, wife sent me. You've got a lot of reluctant males who don't want to have their health addressed, and there's there's an unending amount of humor and jokes about that. But the point being is that what I've found is, for the first time, is that when men will listen to a genetic test, because it's not arguable, like it's not it's just so black and white in terms of this is what you have in terms of your playing field, as you mentioned. Okay, so now we've got this playing field, and this happened to me 2 weeks ago, and I was having a discussion with a patient who I did his genetic. I actually did both the Carbchoice profile, checking for the SAMe1, and also the bigger 58 gene test, and I talked with him, and he volunteered this to me about halfway through. He said, "I guess I really have to give up drinking, don't I?" And after I picked my jaw up off the floor, I says, "Well, in your particular case, based on the specific set of genes you have that relate to those issues that alcohol can provoke, you need to, yes." And he just came to that conclusion on his own. And you can imagine trying to tell that to someone who hadn't come to that conclusion on their own. It was certainly, it's just been amazing to have a test that people will really just profoundly just kind of go into silence and reflect on, okay, what does this actually mean for life?
I just want to pick up on terminology. I use the word genetic profile because with a genetic test, it reminds me of when I was at school. Now, when I sat a test, you either passed or you failed. Whereas a genetic profile, in what we call functional genetic profiling, is it gives you the roadmap. There's no pass or fail. There's no right or wrong. That determines the hardware that you are as an individual. That, you got those genes from your mum and your dad. God love them. You can't change the hardware, but you can compensate for their influence and change the software.
So I can blame my parents?
No, you can't. And so you can change the software that the signals send out by the food you eat, how you exercise, and lifestyle choices. And this is the beautiful about what I call personalised, proactive, preventative healthcare. I've already outlived, I'm 63 this year, I've outlived my father by 11 years, and I'm feeling great. And the other point I want to pick up on is it's not restrictive. In effect, we had one lady very early on that would go up to 150 kilos in weight. She could come down to 88, 90. She'd lost 60 kilos 3 times in her life, but she would yo-yo back up, down, and she'd been on medication. She was that dedicated that she ate no food for 10 months and was on the weight loss shakes. But when she got a profile, to cope with the stress, she would sit down each night with her husband and have a couple of glasses of wine, cheese, and biscuits as a stress relief. But what she found out is genetically she couldn't do that. So now for stress, she would go for a walk with her husband of a night time. But she realised that she could go out maybe 2 nights a week and have 1 glass, maybe 2. But she can't do it 6 or 7 nights a week. And she said if someone had told her that years ago, she wouldn't have done that. So it's not saying you can't do it. It's saying that this is the boundary. It might be a little bit smaller than somebody else. And I totally agree with you, especially with men. When they see their genetic profile, it's not going to change. And they realise they have to change. And again, we only look at genes, that there are interventions in nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle that you can change the gene expression.
Yes, that is so important.
That's the critical thing.
That is so important. I get so concerned about people who getting, different gene tests where they're just learning about these very scary, fatalistic sounding genes that, oh, you've got this, that means you're doomed, or people just going berserk over a single snip of one gene and getting lost in all these blogs and forums when it's taken out of context of the other concert of genes that work alongside those genes. And that's why I love how you've grouped them the way you have, because it's no longer this kind of isolated one gene is determining everything. It's actually a grouping where it explains what's going on in the bigger picture. More importantly, there's lifestyle and nutrition and other factors that you can actually control in your life to alter the expression of these genes. And as opposed to feeling disempowered, people are now feeling empowered by their genetic reports. And that's really a very different focus from what I've seen of other types of gene tests out there.
Absolutely, because it gives you control of your destiny. And to me, my genes are not my destiny because mum and dad got cancer. I don't need to do that. I now have a roadmap, but more importantly, I have the interventions. Your genes are essentially like a dimmer switch. You can dial them up or dial them down based on the nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle choices you are making right now. And the exciting thing is, by making the choices relevant to your genetic profile, you can reduce, like in my case, my risk of cancer. And as I say, I'm feeling great, and I'm not a health or fitness nut. But I know my boundaries, and I'm staying in my playing field. And I think that the feedback we get, that is so empowering to people to be in control of their own destiny and reach their health goal, whether to be running a marathon. God love anyone who wants to do that. That's not my goal, but if you want to do it without tearing muscles or injuring yourself, we can do that. If it's reduce blood pressure, reduce weight, or not finish up with Alzheimer's like my mother-in-law who passed away about over a year ago. It's about healthy living, healthy aging, and it's the same physiological drivers: inflammation, oxidative stress, and unfortunately, as we touched on before, our genes are not coping with our current lifestyle and our environment, and we're more sensitive to that. And picking up on one point you said about looking at just one gene, there's one out that's on blogs everywhere, MTHFR 677C to T. And everyone's going, wow, I've got that. Well, everyone's got that gene. But the thing is, you can't look at that in isolation. There's hundreds and hundreds of other genes that affect this what's called methylation. But you can't look at that without looking at free radical damage, without inflammation. You have to look at the whole picture to figure out what's going on, because if you focus on one gene, you can actually do more damage than you can good by trying to just give intervention on one gene. It's not that simple.
Right.
And as you said, some people bring a very simplistic approach. You've got to look at the whole, it's called systems biology. Our whole body is a system, and we have to look at the person as a whole. And that's why I think we are different and unique, and why we have cardiologists flying from America to Australia to be trained by us. And, other experts.
Yeah, going back to that whole MTHFR, I just realized, because I've learned a lot about it in this whole kind of just kind of health hysteria over this one gene. But then when I saw the way the profile you guys put together, it was in the context of, there's MTHFR 1, MTHFR 2, MTR, COMP, CBS, and others that are all going through these, that's influencing that very same pathway, and then having a bigger picture by understanding the complete pathway, not a specific, lock and key along that pathway. It's looking at and zooming out to the whole thing. And it just made so much sense. And with that, it wasn't, that carried over not just to the MTHFR, looking at the whole systems in which it was operating, but it was looking at the entire pathway of inflammation. You got 15 genes that you've mapped out, that you've chosen, that specifically route through the major biochemical pathways of inflammation, as opposed to just fixating on one that's really has a very powerful influence, like interleukin 6 for the biology geeks listening to it, or TNF alpha, but she actually put 15 in context with each other, and also the other genes do influence those 15 as well, but the 15 major ones, and it just made so much sense. Because then what's even more important and practical to a patient who doesn't need to get lost in in this soup of technical jargon is that the interventions to cover all these different genes that affect a similar pathway can be very, very similar. So the interventions actually don't have to be that complicated or that many, because they've been grouped accordingly. And so if I see that someone has a string of gene variants that SNPs that are not beneficial in, say, the inflammatory pathway or the free radical pathway or the liver detox pathway or methylation or fat metabolism, I can then target the lifestyle according to the groupings of these genes and just deal with all the gene variants, in those groupings all at once. And I've never seen that before, and it just makes my life as a clinician a lot easier, and certainly even more important, it makes my job for my patients a lot easier, because I can now direct them to very few, very targeted interventions. And I think that that's just been a game changer for me in my practice, and certainly for my patients.
Well, I think the important thing to realize is Fitgenes, we did our first genetic profile in, I think it was about May 2006. I went to America and got one of the very first tests. And we had 4 genes at that time. We thought we were doing really well. But what it was is it was used as a way to sell supplements and things like that. And my wife and I made a decision that we...
You mean other people's gene tests were used to sell supplements?
Yeah. And so what we made decision is that we were going to set up a system to educate practitioners such as yourself in how to use the power of nutrigenomics to improve the health and well-being of their patients. We would only deal through accredited practitioners to make sure, and it would be solid science to back up what we've got. Now, since the last 10 years, there's a lot more on the market, people on the market where a lot of them are just, we've got more genes than you. Well, more genes are not better. It's where are they in the process? How do they affect your health? And so it's not more. It's selecting the right ones. And it's also important to make sure there are scientifically backed interventions in nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle to help your patient. We don't look into the drugs. We don't use any drug intervention. It's purely empowering the patients to take control of their own health destiny. And the beauty about it is your genes are the same today until you die, but the health goal might change. It might be that you've gone through a little bit of an injury or something like that, and so there's a whole lot of different health goals you can achieve with the profile. Yeah. So I think that's important. It's not more data, but as you said previously, it's how the data is organized, right, so that you as a practitioner can access it and in simple terms, without getting into all the scientific mumbo-jumbo, in simple terms to explain to your patient. And I think that's the beauty about Fitgenes. And I remember someone said to me, the essence of mastery is simplicity. You know your topic if you can bring it down to simple, practical examples. And that's what it's all about with Fitgenes.
Absolutely. And what I found even more reassuring is that the back end, as a clinician, I received, yards of data when I get back a genetic profile, is that I can go in and look at every single citation that you've put in the literature pointing to explaining why a specific gene has specific lifestyle recommendations. So it's very, very reassuring to me as a clinician that I can just go in and check the actual citations. And there's a couple patients that want to see citations too. They're not that many, but it's a certain personality type. And it's wonderful to know that you've put in this, I don't know how many thousands upon thousands of hours of reading papers, but just that you've done the legwork and you've left a paper trail for us clinicians to follow, and that's really, really reassuring. And with that comes this interesting concept of that if we know about our genes, we can increase, I think what you called it, this health expectancy rather than life expectancy. So can you talk about the distinction between health expectancy and life expectancy, and why it is that it's genetic profiling is the key to having a longer health expectancy?
Well, first of all, the Australian government has put out a report. They updated it 2 years ago, and the good news is we're actually living longer, but the bad news is living longer is actually bad for our health. And what the reason for that is, we know life expectancy is how long you live before you die, but health expectancy is how long you live with good health in the absence of disease. Now, in Australia, as of about 1 to 2 years ago, the difference between health expectancy and life expectancy for men is up to 17.8 years, and for women it is 20.7.
Oh, so 20.7. Okay.
Yeah. So it's around about the 18 and around about 20. It might be 19.8, and a third of that time will be severe disability. So people are living 18 to 20 years, the last years of their life, is with a disability. And so health expectancy is actually going backwards. Now, the reason why it's going backwards is that we're just not out exercising as much as we used to exercise. The sort of food we're eating, it doesn't have the nutritional content of when the food of our grandparents, when their time.
So let me just clarify that just for a second. So, this is when I lecture on nutrition, I make the distinction between calories and nutrition. We have more calories than we ever had available to us in human history.
Absolutely.
But the nutrition, like all the antioxidants and the minerals and the vitamins, that's getting less and less as the soils become depleted and our variety of foods go down and other factors as well. On top of that, we also have increased toxicity from all the chemicals that are being used in all sorts of industries and daily life and manufacturing and just everything around us. So it's like we may have, some people say, well, we have better nutrition. And it says, not necessarily better nutrition. We have better access and abundance of calories. Nutrition is slightly different.
Absolutely. Well, we've got more energy-dense foods, not nutrient-dense foods.
Correct, yeah.
So that's a problem. We're smoking, alcohol, drugs, stress. We've got more pollution, environmental factors. But the reason that health expectancy is going backwards is what we've been talking about, is the interaction of our genes with our current lifestyle and environment. And to give you an idea, the Australian government was so worried about the obesity epidemic, they had this big study a few years ago, and what they found was that environmental and lifestyle factors only contributed 30% to an individual's body weight, but in actual fact, genetics made up the other 70%. But it's actually the gene environment, which is even more complicated. So we really need to get focused on health expectancy, because I'd love to be out skiing with my grandkids at 98. Not spending the last 20 years of my life or in a nursing home or with dementia or not even remember it. So that's what drives me to do what I do, is to help others maximise their potential for healthy living, healthy aging, and help reach whatever goal they want to. So
if you've got if you know your genetic profile, then you know what you need to do in terms of lifestyle and nutrition and exercise and all that. You know what you need to do in order to push that needle forward of health expectancy up and up. We want. I make the comment. We want to. You want to go out like Paul Bragg at age 94 on a surfboard, not 20 years in a nursing home in a wheelchair. And the only tool we have that can reliably push that needle forward without guesswork is genetic profiling. And
absolutely.
It's just like, because if I can know that I have vulnerabilities in inflammatory pathways, and inflammation is the root of so many different disease processes. If I can engage the lifestyle now to reduce my inflammation on a genetic expression level, consistently, then I reduce the risk massively for decades to come.
Absolutely. Well, we call it eliminate the guesswork. And again, inflammation and this free radical damage are the two Siamese twins that underpin every adverse health outcome, whether it be an Olympic athlete, delayed onset muscle soreness, whether it be heart attacks or whatever. And there's a great article that was put out by the Times magazine, and it was called "The Fire Within: Inflammation." And our society is just creating more inflammation. And one of the biggest reasons, which we've been touching on, is when we were hunter-gatherers, the food that produced inflammation the omega-6s versus those that didn't, omega-3s, was a ratio of 2 to 1. Now, it's up to about 30 to 40 to 1. So we're eating so much food that's producing inflammation, our bodies can't cope. We're not exercising as much, which produces inflammation. Stress increases inflammation, lack of sleep. And so there's these common drivers that underpin everything. And that's why you look at, as you've seen, the success that Fitgenes has had with Olympic elite athletes, reducing blood pressure, weight management. We had children with autism, another study that we did across the whole health spectrum. And because we're looking at the root causes and the drivers that underpin our health and well-being.
Absolutely. I think that, to me, the genetic testing, genetic profiling, so caught myself, there we go. With genetic profiling, to me, is now the intersection point between, it's the intersection point where people who are wanting to have the confidence of the Western science meets the lifestyle expertise of natural health care. Because I grew up with, both my parents were medical doctors, and so was my grandfather. And the tools that they had were, drugs and surgery. And whereas natural healthcare practitioners, they don't necessarily have all the fancy testing. That's changed now, especially in the past 10, 20 years. But the natural healthcare practitioners, like chiropractors, naturopaths, osteopaths, acupuncturists, etc., they've got the lifestyle training down. And what I see is with the genetic testing, it's the best marriage I've seen of the really, just drilled down literally to the gene level science, and then it comes back up into, okay, what's the lifestyle intervention? Oh, the natural healthcare people, they know how to actually implement and work with people on this level. And to me, it's where the future of medicine is going. Is genetic profiling is going to give everyone the peace of mind that there is really hardcore dedicated science to this process, and that the lifestyle interventions that are being recommended are backed up and then can be implemented through the guidance of a properly trained natural healthcare practitioner. And of course, there are medical practitioners who are properly trained in this, but people like myself, even though I was supposed to be the third generation medical doctor, took a bit of a left turn into natural medicine. We're the ones who dedicated our lives to practicing this way. So I see that the genetic profiling has the opportunity to really kind of cross the aisle between the two major halves of medicine in the world today for the ultimate true benefit of our patients.
Absolutely. Well, I think you made a very interesting observation at one of the workshops previously, and I don't see it now that's the domain of just one sort of treatment, whether it be medicine, allied health. I see it teams working together, and the one common denominator is the patient's genetic profile. You can have a nutritionist doing the nutrition interventions, the exercise person giving the interventions which are personalised, and then you've got the people, the medical in there, and you've got the allied health professionals, and it should be a team approach. But I think one of the important things, if people are looking at getting a genetic profile done, is it disease-focused, fear-driven, or is it empowering, health-focused, number one? Number two, is it backed up by solid science? I love that one of your colleagues in Wellington decided to see how much research was in our proprietary software called Practware.
And they got lost for how many hours in that software?
8 hours later, the
God.
practitioner was still looking at the science, and she hadn't got anywhere near it. So we have the science to back it up. But I think the most important thing is the company using it to sell supplements, weight loss shakes, or something like that. We have no vested interest in the interventions that you, as a practitioner, we've got to make sure that you have the best of science and the best interventions so that you can give her the best quality of care to your patients. And I think it's also important to mention now that in America, there's a whole new area called functional medicine. And the Jeffrey Bland, the father of functional medicine, said there's no such thing as disease. A disease doesn't exist. It is just a consequence of upstream what they call biochemical processes not operating properly. And if the things such as inflammation, oxidative stress, the immune system, if they're not operating properly, they will show as finding the weakest part in your body. And I think that's the approach that what we've taken is, let's look at the things that control the outcome rather than look at the outcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's that we're looking, the couple things you mentioned there. One is that you as a genetic profiling company are agnostic about what interventions, what type of nutrient interventions clinicians use, which then gives you a much higher degree of credibility because you're not yoked to some, supplement company or whatever. That me as a clinician, I have the choice of picking whatever interventions, lifestyle, supplements, exercise, other recommendations. But that is left up to me in terms of the details of that. In terms of you give specific this kind of generic, essential fatty acids. You don't tell us what brand. It's just like you need to get essential fatty acids. Yeah. So the other is that this idea that there's a difference between the fear, like you have this disease as if with a capital D, as if it's permanent, versus it's an adaptive state based off of chronic mismatching of your lifestyle environment with the genes you've been given, and that the disease state is actually an adaptation state for your body to try to cope with what it's dealing with.
Absolutely. And I think there's research out when we first started that showed that 70% of bad lifestyle choices are still modifiable after the age of 40. Mm-hmm. And so that's a message of hope from us, not fear, doom and gloom. And I think that's really, really empowering to people and helping them take control of their own destiny. And I think it's great. And the only that we've got to make sure you've got the solid science to help you make the best choice, which you well do. And truly know.
I opened up the software under interleukin 6, and I'm like, my computer screen couldn't even fit just the headers. That didn't even, when you click it, opened up all the science papers underneath it, I couldn't even fit it on my screen, just the headers of it, and because there's just so many of them. And in fact, we were at we have a meetup. We have a group here in Wellington, and we talked about, and we covered interleukin 6 in detail, and we took the entire session just barely getting through as the interleukin 6 by itself. And for those people listening, interleukin 6 is a major keystone gene for inflammation. That, in fact, I took a special interest in this and presented it at one of the peer groups in one of the recent conferences of Fitgenes here in New Zealand. And basically, with interleukin 6, if you've got a variant on this gene, you have a high vulnerability. It makes a lot of visceral fat, which then makes more interleukin 6, which makes more visceral fat, which makes more interleukin. So it's just kind of this round and round and round. These are the people that just the more they exercise, the fatter they get, because they're creating more inflammation, which then creates more fat, and then more fat creates more inflammation, and round it goes. Did I summarize that accurately?
Yes, it does. Okay. Yeah. And I think the important thing is, that it's not complicated by, as you mentioned previously, it's not the amount of data you've got, it's putting in groupings that will make it simple for you to work with the patient. Mm-hmm. And by the way they're grouping, and that's the feedback. It's not hard interventions. But I think the important thing also, which we sort of touched on, is that not only have we got the science behind what we do, we have proven clinical results. We're currently undertaking research in Auckland University of Technology, and we've got research in Malaysia, Australia, at major universities. So we've got the research to back it up, and we have the results. And as you have seen with the diabetic study in Auckland, one of the patients there, been on a type 2 diabetic back in 2000, had a heart attack in 2006, been on medication for 16 years, 3 types of medication, looked at going back to that AMY1 Carbchoice result. on making the lifestyle and nutrition choices within 2 weeks under the supervision of his doctor, was off all medication within 2 weeks after 16 years. And the doctor said without that important bit of information, that missing piece in the puzzle, he would not have been able to find out why. He would have kept looking for some medical reason to that. And that gentleman is still, after 12 weeks, he lost 12 kilograms as well, 16 centimetres off his waist. BMI went down by 4 units, and his blood pressure went down significantly, and the glucose measurements all went down. So we have proven results, and you've seen them as well. And I think that's, if anyone's looking there, is show me the results. Show me the science, show me the results.
Well, in the approximate minute and a half that we have left, can you tell us just briefly what the 2 tests Fitgenes offers, and then what's the website that people can go to?
Well, we offer 2 products. We have our general health and wellbeing panel, which looks at the drivers behind the whole health spectrum, from Olympic athlete, high blood pressure, weight management, premenopausal, menopausal women, children with autism. That's the gold standard, and that is offered through our Fitgenes accredited practitioners. Then we have this Carbchoice, which looks at this AME1, the starch. So they're the 2 major ones. For more information, it's really to seek out a Fitgenes accredited practitioner. Our website is www.fitgenes.com, but it's more about going through our practitioners. So that's the best way, and we've really got some great practitioners since we've become New Zealand, such as yourself, the group in Wellington and all over New Zealand. So find your local Fitgenes accredited practitioner, which will be on the website, and have a chat to people like yourself. And obviously you've got your website as well. So
and just if people, my website's www.drsamshay.com, drsamshay.com, and also I can send these test kits, around the world. So if people do want to work with their preferred Fitgenes practitioner, it doesn't necessarily have to be local, because Skype is a wonderful thing, and you can do some interventions no matter where you are in the world. And I want to thank you, Dr. Beaver. We are finishing up. We've got 7 seconds left. Thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to future conversations.
My pleasure. Thanks, Sam.
That's the end of this episode of the Dr. Sam Shay Show. If you want to ask me a question or suggest a guest for a future episode, head over to drsamshay.com/podcast question. That's drsamshay.com/podcast question. To stay up to date with the latest information and podcast episodes, go to drsamshay.com and put in your name and email, and you'll also get a copy of my ebook, Ending Adrenal Fatigue, The Easy Breakfast Guide. This ebook is written for those who struggle with unexplained fatigue, brain fog, or those that reach for sugar or caffeine in late mornings and or mid-afternoons. This ebook explains why, and it only takes about 15 minutes to read, offering simple strategies to help you reclaim your energy. The Easy Breakfast Guide decodes the 4, quote, bad breakfasts, covers the controversy of coffee, the link between balanced hormones and breakfast, shares next steps, and includes a breakfast shopping guide. Go to drsamshay.com and get your free copy today, and thanks for listening. This podcast is brought to you by the Carbchoice Genetic Profile, where you can genetically determine your optimal diet through a simple cheek swab in the comfort of your own home. Are you confused about diet, unsure of carbs versus fat, gone gluten-free, yet don't feel much better? Well, you're not alone. I've taught diet and nutrition since the year 2000, and I thought I knew a lot about diet. Then I got my butt handed to me by Carbchoice, and I finally got the answers I wanted. You see, genetically, not everyone can tolerate carbs well, though some can. Think of it like this. A big pile of carbs, like rice, must be broken down by Pacman-like enzymes called amylase. A specific gene called AME1 makes these carb-crunching Pacman-like enzymes, and each copy of this gene acts like a chute spitting out these Pacman to chomp down carbs. If you have 20 copies of this gene, you have a Carbchoice score of 20, meaning you have 20 chutes spitting out amylase Pacman, easily chewing through a big pile of carbs. If you only have 1 copy of the AME1 gene, you have a Carbchoice score of 1, meaning you only have 1 chute spitting out amylase Pacman, which isn't enough to break down even a small pile of carbs. Even if the carbs are organic and gluten-free, The remaining undigested carbs become inflammatory, irritating, and imbalancing to the gut and gut bacteria, causing digestive problems with systemic consequences, which is exactly what happened to me. Turns out, I have a Carbchoice score of 2, meaning I only have 2 shoots making Pac-Man, which explained why even small amounts of carbs, even if they are organic and gluten-free, still caused me bad and embarrassing digestive problems. I used to think I was gluten intolerant, but in reality, I'm genetically carb intolerant. Fortunately, it only took a week of clearing up unnecessary carbs for my Carbchoice score of 2, and my digestive problems cleared up for the first time in 20 years. I strongly recommend you find out your Carbchoice score. If you have a particular diet you like, don't worry. You can adapt your existing diet to your Carbchoice score, and I can teach you how. Just go to www.drsamshay.com/Carbchoice, and I'll send you a free video about Carbchoice and how it compares to and integrates with 15 other diets, such as the paleo diet, ketogenic diet, slow carb, Mediterranean diet, blood type diet, the 5 types of vegetarianisms, metabolic typing, Weston A. Price, and others. Diet trends come and go, yet your genetics stay the same. Carbchoice is truly personalized nutrition through functional genetics. Also, when you opt in, you'll get a coupon code for 20% off your Carbchoice profile. Your Carbchoice profile comes with a 14-page report, includes food lists of what to eat and what to avoid, and includes how to temporarily boost your amylase Pac-Man production by up to 500% for those higher carb events like birthday parties, social events, or business lunches, even if you're a low Carbchoice score like me. A kit will be mailed to you anywhere in the world. You can do this simple cheek swab in the comfort of your own home, and I'll also email you video instructions on how to and not to do the cheek swab. And for a limited time, your Carbchoice score will include a 30-minute consult with me by phone or Skype to answer your questions about your Carbchoice profile and personalized nutrition. Just go to drsamshay.com/Carbchoice and get your free video training and 20% off coupon for your Carbchoice profile today.